guys. Welcome back to the American Experiment podcast. My name is Grace Keating. Kathryn Johnson, what do we have on the docket for this week?
Oh my gosh, we have a great show for you. First off, we're going to talk about what's going on in Texas a little bit with the gerrymandering scandal, if you will. We'll go over the details there and then talk about how it relates to Minnesota. After that, we're going to play a game. We have a new game announcement, and it's called Two Truths and a Lie. So we'll get into that. And then on our back half, our energy policy fellow, Sarah Montalbano, sits down for a conversation with Grace and me. About a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that. We're pleased, as always, to welcome big, beautiful Bill Walsh to the studio. I'll stop using that name.
No, that's a lie. You know? Two truths, lie. I like it.
I am sorry. But Bill, you're kind of our resident expert on all things Minnesota politics. You've had some very entertaining gerrymandering stories of your time in Minnesota politics that we've been sharing off air before the show started. We don't have time for all of those stories, but we do want your insight.
I thought podcasts had no length. We could go as long as we want.
Yeah, not on this one. Not for that content.
Could talk hours on redistricting.
And I'm sure you'd all love that, but we won't do that to you.
Geek out.
Oh, man, there's a threat.
So let's dive on in. If you haven't been keeping up to date with the Texas situation, basically the legislators down there are doing kind of an odd move. They're doing a mid-decade redistricting of their congressional districts, and it's causing quite a bit of anger, I would say, from the Democrats down there, when you say.
Yeah, the Democrats have actually all fled to keep the Republicans from getting a quorum, really similar to what happened here, where we had our Democrats not show up, except this time the Democrats in Texas have fled to Illinois. They have completely left the state, and the governor of Illinois has said, stay here for as long as you want.
It's a sanctuary state, Illinois. A sanctuary for fleeing Democrats from other states to avoid doing their job.
It's a sanctuary for gerrymandering as well, because if you look at the Illinois map, they must be the poster child.
Yeah, they are. I think we should get into that in a bit, but yeah, that's not going to work. You've got a strong Republican governor down there, and he's already said, he's looking at ways where they can. They miss 10 days in a row, they can be thrown out of office. I mean, they're going to have much stronger consequences than just political consequences, which is what we saw here.
Sure.
Eventually, Democrats here had political consequences. They were hearing it at the grocery store. Why aren't you at work? And by the way, American Experiment did a very good campaign to put that pressure on them, but it was easy. Because it was obvious you should go back to work. They're going to feel stronger consequences in Texas.
With the governor. I mean, Greg Abbott, I saw Walter Hudson was replying to some people on Twitter, Representative Walter Hudson, who were asking, why didn't you guys do this in Minnesota? Because Greg Abbott said, if you come back to Texas, you risk arrest, basically. You might be arrested. And Walter Hudson said, well, we don't have our governor's Tim Walz. This is all action that the governor is taking. So they have a much easier time with those consequences, if you will. But what else is similar? I mean, I want to talk a little bit about, I think people know in general what gerrymandering is, but if not, talk about it a little bit, Bill. What is gerrymandering? And then let's get into the basics of how and when this happens. Specifically, let's talk Minnesota, since that's what we're all here for.
Okay, well, gerrymandering, is basically manipulating the legislative districts to get a political gain. I mean, that's the basic bottom line. You can study the history of, I think the guy's name was Eldred Gerry, who was the first to do this, or his district might have been his district that was first. There was actually a guy named Eldred Gerry. That's why it's called gerrymandering.
That's hilarious.
It was his crazy meandering, looked like a salamander. The district did gerrymandering.
I thought it was just kind of, you were like Jimmy rigging the district.
Yeah, no, the word itself has some historical. You could look into that. But it was the first example of this. It says manipulate. So every 10 years we get a census and we get new data. So people move into the state or around in the state. And so the principle is, one person, one vote. Everybody's district should be about the same size, or actually very close to the same size, for equal representation. My congressman should work for the same amount of people that your congressman works for.
Sure.
And when over 10 years the population can swing a lot, and you can be out of whack, from a population standpoint. So the lines have to be redrawn to keep things fair. That's the principle. It's usually a decade thing. And what you're seeing now is some power play out of Texas. And they're doing it because they can, essentially. Okay. There's nothing preventing a state from redoing the boundaries anytime. And so they're at the mid-year point of the decade, and they're saying, well, we want to do it now. I would argue this is very political. Let's be clear about that. I mean, this is politics. This is to get a better map.
They want to, the way they've redrawn it, I think would add 5 Republicans to Congress.
Just by moving the lines around, you can imagine the electoral makeup is going to be different. But if there was some tremendous growth or change in population in a state in the 5 years instead of 10, you could absolutely argue, hey, we should get back and get new maps because they're out of whack. I don't know that they're arguing that, District 1 in Texas is only got 750,000 and District 6 has 1 million people in it. I don't think that's the argument. It's politics. And what they're answering in the political world is, well, they're doing it too. So Democrats do this too. They've done it forever. When they have complete power of a state, not necessarily the mid-decade redistricting, but when they do the map, they gerrymander the map.
Sure.
And so you can gerrymander a map mostly. The one thing you can't do is harm a minority group, a racial minority group. So the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s, the Voting Rights Act, does not allow redistricting to harm the chances of either electing a minority to office or giving fair representation to minorities that live in a district. So you can't do that. And if Texas does that, they could be subject to a federal lawsuit. So you see this a lot. A state will redraw its map. The other side will sue and say to a federal court, hey, this benefits minorities or hurts minorities and is unconstitutional. And a lot of times those lawsuits will prevail. The problem is, in the meantime, the map is used. So you have an election under that map. Then the court case throws out the map, sends them back, got to draw a new map. And in some states,
the damage has been done by that.
Well,
point,
you've got some elections won, but now we've got a new map. Sometimes right before an election or a certain amount of time, because you can't do it the day before. Obviously, you got to have availability for campaigns. But sometimes right at the last minute, the court will throw the map out, and you got to put a new one in, or the court will draw a map. So that happens all over the country.
And just to clarify, you're saying that there's no real laws about gerrymandering as far as what the districts can look like, except for that they can't,
right.
There are
they have
to protect minorities' rights.
There are principles of redistricting. So the most important principle is the population size. So they should be really close to the same. And I don't have the language in Minnesota, but that's in statute in Minnesota that the disparity between districts has to be very, very minimal. So less than 1%, I think, is the maps that we have now are like less than 1%, even 0.5%, the deviation among the districts. That's the number one principle in redistricting. There are other principles like continuity. The districts should be contiguous. They should be connected. You can't have part of a district here and then part there and part there. That's mostly held across the country. Compactness. You're going to see violations of compactness when we show you some maps here. They should be, an area that's a shape that makes sense. And then as you look through the map, the shape should make sense. It should be compact.
Sure.
Communities of interest. You don't draw a district that has part rural farming and then go into the urban area. So that congressperson is like, well, what do I do when I go to DC? Who do I represent? I got urban areas. I got farm areas. Those aren't communities of interest. We should keep those together. Those are principles.
Yeah.
But within that, you can do whatever you want. And what the parties do is they look at the index in the district. Oh, how many Republicans do we have? How many Democrats do we have? And you can use that data, and the map technology is so good, you can draw districts to say, we have a really good chance of winning this district. And if we draw the map this way, we can win 5 more seats. And that's what's happening in Texas. And that's what's happened in other states.
Now, so those principles are kind of answering a question that I've had, which is, if we want to be as fair as possible, why can't we just draw a grid over each state and every district is, a little square and they don't look at, race, voting records, anything. But I get the argument of you wouldn't want to have a district that is split by, urban or rural. You want to know that your congressperson is representing you and your interests. So that does make sense, I suppose.
Yeah, and you can't, the map software programs have evolved over time. So with AI, you can just tell the software, draw a map. The computer can draw the map.
Yeah.
But the problem is that, humans do this. There's always going to be politics in it. There's always decisions you have to make it work. It's a puzzle. Like in Minnesota, if you start, used to be the 6 counties in the northwest corner of the state equaled a perfect Senate district. I think they still do. I think that's Mark Johnson's district starting. And that's where if you look at the map of Minnesota and you're going to draw a map, you start in the northwest corner. and that's the Senate minority leader's district, and it used to be the perfect 6 counties. Okay, District 1 is done. That's great. We kept the county lines together. We didn't split cities. That's another concept. Try not to split cities.
Yeah.
Try not to split counties.
This is very complicated.
And then the software will kick out a report. How many cities did you split? How many counties did you split? Because those are communities of interest. They should be in the same congressional district.
Yeah.
You want the map that does the minimum number of splits. So all of this goes into play, but it's naturally political. You cannot avoid the politics. The other piece, just to do a little Minnesota history, is the where incumbents live. Now, I would argue, and when we did redistricting, who cares where the incumbents live?
Yeah.
Sure.
It's not their district. It's for the next 10 years. They're not going to be there the next 10 years. Some will, but a lot of them, most I'd say, aren't going to be there. So I don't think map makers should care where incumbents live. Just a little, the 2010 map, the courts drew the map. I mean, we can talk about the process in Minnesota, but essentially a clerk of a court panel drew the map. And my criticism of the map was essentially fair, was mostly fair, but they really cared where incumbents lived. And a great example is our own Matt Dean, who works for us now, was majority leader in the House. And he was paired with another Republican member of the House. And if you look at the
the new map.
in the new map that came out in 2011, 12 for the 2012 election, he and Carol McFarland were paired together. And if you look at the map, the southern line of the thing is like 1 block south of where Carol lived.
So
And
that was intentional.
I think intentional. You're never going to get the guy in front of a judge and say that. And so that was pairing Matt Dean, the majority leader of the House, with another Republican.
Yeah.
Because obviously incumbents have an advantage in the election, so they want to get rid of the other party's incumbents.
Right, because they've got that name recognition.
Yeah.
And then there was in that same map, the other example I remember, there was a state senator named Satvir Chaudhry who represented a racial minority. He was an Indian. I mean, I don't know if that was, but he should have been paired with another Democrat. They lived very close to each other.
Okay.
And any drawing of the map had them paired. Every time we did a map, those two were paired. I forget who the other senator was.
Sure.
And by God, the court drew a map and drew a line right between their houses. They lived very close together. And there's the line. There's where Satvir Chaudhry lives. There's where I can't remember the other senator's name lives. Wow. Creative map drawing. Lucky those guys. They both had Democrat districts still.
Well, and this is so frustrating because you think of the courts, it shouldn't be political. I think legislature, I think political. I think governor, I think political. The courts are not designed to be a political arm of a certain party.
And mostly they weren't.
Can we start at the beginning? Because now we're getting ahead of ourselves, I think, just as far as like where do the courts come in? So let's talk about in Minnesota, how these maps come to be. So start at the beginning of the process. Usually every 10 years, we get the census. Go from there.
Yeah. So the census comes out and then you see, wow, with all the population moving around, there are people that live in Minnesota that live in districts that are not fair. Okay. And so what's been the process for decades in Minnesota is a lawsuit begins the process. So somebody files a lawsuit, one of the parties essentially, or both of the parties, but it's kind of who goes first. In 2000, I was working in redistricting for the party and we filed the lawsuit first. So I found plaintiffs that lived in like Wright County and different parts of the state that had grown, like Otsego, Minnesota in 2000 had grown tremendously. So the people who lived in Otsego had 70,000 people in a state house district, twice the size of other Minneapolis.
So they're getting less representation. They're getting less,
exactly.
But it's not an automatic process. You have to bring forward a lawsuit to get this started.
Well, this is how it's done. I'll get to that. I'll get to that answer.
I'm getting out of it.
Yes and no. It's just what's happened is there's been a lawsuit filed by people who have been harmed under the current map.
Sure.
So this map is illegal. We now have the census. So judge, I'm being harmed. I need a new map. So you find plaintiffs, you file a lawsuit. The two parties weigh in into the lawsuit. Other parties weigh in. The Supreme Court usually takes over. The state Supreme Court Chief Justice says, all right, everyone wants in on this redistricting lawsuit. We'll appoint a panel of judges, and they appoint a panel. It's like a Supreme Court judge, a few Court of Appeals judges, maybe a district court judge, 3 or 5 panel judge panel is set up, and that case is kind of consolidated there. And then those panels says, great, we've got this, but the legislature's job is to do redistricting. We need to give them a chance to do their job. We're not going to intervene until they fail.
Okay.
And so there's kind of a dual process now. So now you've got legislative caucuses gear up for redistricting. They're going to pass a bill with the new maps. Now, forever in Minnesota, we've had split control, either split legislature or a governor out of, there hasn't been a trifecta control of government during a redistricting period in Minnesota for a long time.
Interesting. Okay.
Maybe ever. So it's kind of an exercise. So Republicans do a map, Senate Republicans do a map, House Republicans do a map. Maybe they're together. Maybe they're not. House Democrats, Senate Democrats do maps. And then you got the congressional plans that the caucuses have to do for the congressional plans. So everyone's talking to everybody, and there's a lot of backroom stuff going on. You're trying to solve everybody's problems and keep everybody happy. It's a very difficult legislative thing because members of the legislature get very concerned about their future, their political future, and they're the ones voting on the map. And so
they shouldn't be allowed in this process. I feel like I should do this or something, like a neutral party. Sorry.
Well, that's a whole nother can of worms because many states have set up redistricting commissions, and there's been a big push in Minnesota to do a redistricting commission. But I'm very much against redistricting commissions, and it's been proven around the country. Okay, we're gonna have neutral people do it.
Right.
Who's neutral?
Right.
Who's
Yeah.
neutral?
Right.
Who appoints them? A Republican, a Democrat.
Yeah.
It never works.
Yeah.
And it always harms Republicans. And Arizona is a great example. I mean, they put Republicans, Democrats, and independents, and the independents they put on there turned out to be Democrats, and they voted with the Democrats, and then Arizona Republicans, who had majority control in the legislature, gave their power to a commission and got a horrible map out of it. So it's a bad idea.
Couldn't you say, though, in Minnesota that could happen with the courts appointing specific, it seems like almost random judges? Does it ever happen that, you look at these judges and you're like, wow, Walz appointee, Dayton appointee. Does that play into it?
It does, but I will just say the maps, we'll go back to 1990. The 1990 legislature was Democrat-controlled House and Senate. Arnie Carlson was the governor. They passed a very, very partisan map. The best possible case for Democrats. Arnie Carlson vetoed the map as expected. He screwed up the veto. He didn't veto it in time. You have so many days to veto a bill. The Senate Democrats figured out that they could, and they said, hey, you didn't veto this in time. And that went to court. We lost. Arnie Carlson lost. And the Democrat dream map became enacted in 1992.
No.
And Republicans had to live under that map until 2002. By the way, Steve Swigum won the majority in the House in 1998 with a dream Democrat map. But the population had shifted so much that House Republicans would win, 60 seats, not enough to be in the majority, but would win way more votes in those 60 seats than the Democrats had.
Interesting.
And so
That is so frustrating.
So that was 1990. Now 2002, these parties played it out in the legislature. There was split control. Nothing passed, and the courts enacted a map. Relatively fair map.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're
2010,
maps have
same
been pretty
thing happened.
fair. Is that right in Minnesota?
Same thing happened in 2010 and 2020. Legislature split control. Everybody fights it out, and you just wait for the court map to come out. I had some problems with the 2010 map where they cared about where incumbents live, but otherwise, relatively fair map. So we have been boring in redistricting because the court panel has done it. Judges haven't gotten too crazy. No matter who appointed them, they've taken it pretty seriously. So we have not had horrible gerrymandering in Minnesota. We don't have a civil rights issue, really. We have too many whites in Minnesota for it to even come up. There's just, I'll say in 2000, we, meaning Republicans, because I was working there at the time, we had a strategy to put Minneapolis and St. Paul into the same congressional district.
Cool.
And the idea was that we could build a district that had as many minorities as possible to give them a chance to elect somebody. Now,
because there had never been a minority
because we had not
elected?
had anybody elected to Congress yet.
To Congress.
Yep. Now you've had Ilhan Omar, you've had Keith Ellison, you've had others, and so that became a huge source. But Democrats did not want to do that because they wanted both seats. They didn't want. That was essentially packing. You're packing a lot of Democrats into one. Now we argued, it's an urban core. The congressperson from that district would support the urban core of Minneapolis-St. Paul. Very similar interest. It gave the minorities the best chance to elect somebody. We argued that splitting those two split the base of blacks, for instance, into two pieces, and they were never going to win. They weren't a big enough portion of either district to elect a black to Congress. Now they have since then, but that was the argument, and that was so that all goes into play.
Yeah, you're arguing for the different principles.
Yep, and there's lots of politics in that on both sides.
Can we show the Minnesota map for a second? I want to see the Minnesota, and then we briefly touched on the Illinois map where these Texas legislators are hiding out. We should show that too because really it's incredible. Minnesota. Okay. Yeah, it looks
So-
pretty good.
On a compactness basis, it's a very, you can see the compact districts there, and if you could zoom into the cities, and five and four are the two core cities, 5 being Minneapolis, 4 being St. Paul. Now they've grown. The cities aren't big enough to support a congressional district anymore. So 4 has a lot of suburbs in it. 5 has less suburbs, but the first ring suburbs west of Minneapolis are all in it. And then, it's a relatively fair, and you've got a 4-4 split. You've got 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats.
Yeah.
Well, because we just lost one in 2020?
No, we haven't lost a seat yet. No,
Weren't we at 9?
No,
Oh,
we've been at 8, and we are likely to lose.
Okay, got it.
We are likely to lose in the next drawing. We should have probably lost in this last national reapportionment. We probably should have lost a seat, but we didn't. I think it's likely to happen in 2030 that we'll go down to 7.
Okay, interesting. Let's go to Illinois now, Isaac, if you would, and just compare.
Yeah, so here's a great example of gerrymandering. So you can see District 13 here, and this is blue and red, Democrat, Republican. So Southern Illinois is mostly Republican, and votes that way. But they very creatively drew a District 13 there that is this sliver of blue to pack all these Democrats into one district so they could win a district.
Also, 15 continued is so funny.
Well,
it's like
it is.
split.
It is not. It's contiguous.
Oh my gosh! Like that feels like
Yes.
it should be illegal. To
If you're
me.
listening-
this feels like
It is,
You have to look this up.
Yeah,
it is not illegal unless they ruined the racial mix-up to harm minorities.
that is
Otherwise,
a problem.
otherwise, it's power. It's just pure
Right.
power. They can do it because they can.
They can
So
do it
that's-
because they have Democrats in the House, the Senate, and the governor.
Yep, and they pass the bill, and nothing Republicans can do.
Jeez.
There's no lawsuit that'll fix that unless they screwed it up from a civil rights perspective, which they didn't.
So the fact that these Texas Democrats are fleeing to Illinois as like this safe haven for democracy where they don't do gerrymandering is so ridiculous, so hypocritical.
I don't understand that. I mean, they could have just gone to the neighboring state. I mean, they just needed to get out of the state because the Abbott could send the state patrol out and find them and bring
Sure.
them in.
I read a
physically
couple
bring
of
in.
them went to New York and a couple somewhere else, but they all went to Democrat states. I don't know if that has to do with them being afraid of getting arrested in Republican-run states. I have no idea. But J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, has said, "You're safe here. You are welcome
Well,
to."
he's a hotel magnate, so he's just saying, you can stay in one of my hotels,
He put them up.
Yeah. So do you want to do Texas?
Yeah, let's do Texas.
So this is the Texas map, Isaac. Is it on? So the Texas map, they're relatively compact. The districts don't look silly. They are, though, doing some very political things in the new map, the proposed districts. For instance, they're creating majority black districts. There are 0 majority black districts in Texas now. In the new map, they create 2 majority black districts. And they're going to, hey, look what we did. We're helping black voters, and we're going to. But that's actually packing black voters into districts so that Democrats will win overwhelmingly, which allows Republicans to win other districts around them.
Sure.
So it's packing.
So very political.
You're
Again,
either packing or you're diluting their strength. Both are a redistricting strategy that's questionable.
So for that, will they get challenged in court?
They
Like, does
might.
that make it
This could put the map in jeopardy, but I would assume that the lawyers helping are going to be able to draw maps and advise on the maps so that they're not susceptible to a court loss.
Okay.
You'd assume they're doing that, but that's the only vulnerability in a plan like that would be the civil rights violations in it.
At face value, looking at them side by side, it almost looks better to me. It looks cleaner in some ways, but I mean,
Yeah, well, you have to zoom
I'm
in.
no
You'd have
expert.
to zoom into Dallas and Houston. That's where all the
Yeah.
shenanigans are.
okay.
But I think that for the most part, they're going to be compact and they're going to follow. They're not going to be as crazy as some of the Maryland districts or the Illinois districts or some of
Sure.
the California districts that are the shapes get really weird.
Sure.
Gerrymandered.
We're not really seeing that here. Okay. Well, this has been so fun. I've learned
Wow.
so much. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, I feel like we just got a ton of information.
Do we have
Thank
to
you.
stop? I could keep going.
No, we
my
should
God.
stop.
I
I
think
appreciate
that's
the offer,
good.
but let's move on to something more fun. Let's play our game for the week. Bill, are you familiar with the concept of 2 truths and a lie?
Yes.
Wonderful. For anyone who's listening
Even though
who's
I'm
not,
a boomer,
you are kind of a boomer.
I'm not technically a boomer. Actually.
Oh, what, by like 1 year, right?
Yes, by 1 year.
Gotta hang on to
Thanks
that.
for
That's like
saying
how
that.
I
Distinction.
am Gen Z, actually.
By a year.
That's great.
I'm like right on the edge. Like sometimes they count it, sometimes they don't.
Kind of like what you identify as, isn't
Yeah.
it? Like you
And I'm
do
so
not
a
identify as a
millennial,
boomer.
like,
You
as a
identify as a
person.
millennial.
Yeah, but
100%.
I could be Gen Z.
I learned that not everyone is familiar with
I'm
this
just a
game
Bill.
when we brought it up to John Hindrocker today, who had no idea that 2 truths
He
and a
hasn't
lie.
done a lot of icebreakers in his time. I feel like this is a typical icebreaker if you're
doesn't
in
go
like
to
a weird social
showers.
situation. Yeah. Yes. Bridal showers.
Oh my gosh, literally. Yeah. So the concept, if you're not familiar, is we're going to read 3 statements. I'll get into more what they are, but 3 statements, and we as a group have to decide which one is the lie. One of them is a lie, and then there are 2 that are true, and we have to collectively decide which is the lie. This week we're looking at grants that the Minnesota state government has given out to different categories. These kind of remind me of like golden turkey nominees. It's small dollar amounts going to really ridiculous items.
And Isaac picked them, so we have no idea we have no pre-knowledge. We're guessing.
It's very exciting.
Shout out producer Isaac.
Thank you, producer Isaac.
I'm a little nervous.
He even put them in these nice little envelopes. Look, it's like we're at the Oscars.
Yeah. So we're going to vote on which one is the lie. I'm going to dramatically rip open the envelope, and then that will tell us if it was in fact the lie or if it's real and we are spending money on it. Our first one is called Thunderbird Strike video game. Grant amount was $3,250. This project is a scrolling video game in which the player controls a mythic Thunderbird. You've already lost me. That gains lightning power to destroy oil infrastructure, pipelines, rigs, trucks, and revive wildlife and ecosystems across a landscape predating and during pipeline development. Includes,
amazing. This is real. This
has to be real, right? It includes narrative sequences highlighting indigenous environmental resistance framed as protest art with heavy symbolism. I would say absolutely real.
We're funding
the grant is funding the development of this video game. I imagine for $3,000. Yeah, for $3,200. I'm immediately saying it's real.
We're gonna hear them all first.
No, we're gonna hear them all, but just like initial reaction.
No, I'm skeptical.
Seems
of that
legit.
one.
You've done a lot of. I feel like this could be developed for like schools or like nature centers or something. I could totally see this being real. Yeah. Our second one, oh my lord, is Decolonized Werewolf Storytelling Circle.
Oh my gosh.
The grant amount is $9,450. This project reclaims Minnesota's forgotten lupine legends through a series of public storytelling nights that blend Dakota oral tradition with queer speculative fiction and full moon drumming. Attendees are encouraged to dress as their, quote, inner creature and reflect on their, quote, muzzled wolf within.
What? No, that can't be real.
That was
I hope
like
it's not real.
the biggest roller coaster of a description.
Here's the problem, though. Like, there's no way Isaac came up with all of those descriptors. Like, that's so specific and weird.
So true.
I don't think he came up with all those. Wow.
I'm frightened.
What's the last one?
Of what the last one is. Last one is called, wow, okay, coming down. Cable Access TV History Study. $9,975 grant, state grant. This grant funded research and documentation of the history of community access television in Minnesota, specifically in the Twin Cities metro area, hired consultants to research the history of community access television in Minnesota with an eye toward producing a future documentary. The goal is to archive early video productions, interview key local figures, and preserve records about how cable access TV evolved as a platform for public voice and artistic expression. I feel like if you were going to make one up, this would be like the most believable. You know what I mean? This is so like vanilla, boring.
Is it weird that we think that the one that's the lie is like the most normal? I don't know.
That seems like a red flag. That's true. Bill, what do you think? We have Cable Access TV History Study, Decolonized Werewolf Storytelling Circle. We need like graphics to come on the screen for these. I need some visual images.
Please,
and then we have the Thunderbird Strike video game.
Well, the problem, my guess is it's the video game is the fake one, but we had a Golden Turkey winner a few years ago where they played Dungeons and Dragons and we paid them to do a production of Dungeons and Dragons live and people came to a theater and watched it. Ironically, by the way, one of the people that received that grant and that we featured as a Golden Turkey Award winner came to one of our events in Duluth and introduced himself to me and said, "I just want to check you guys out and see what you're all about." And it was funny. It was very interesting. He was a good guy.
No, we probably gave him a lot of publicity for his Dungeons and Dragons.
That's true.
He was a good guy, and he.
We did say he executed on his grant very well.
We were complimentary, and it was you did what you said you were going to do in the grant, but
I just don't think I should be paying for it. But
yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go with the video game as I sadly the werewolf thing sounds way too real.
I think it's real.
I've read a lot of this stuff.
No, I think werewolf has to be fake. I think werewolf is my guess because Decolonized Werewolf Storytelling Circle is too absurd. Like there's too. I think it's too absurd. Or maybe Okay.
So wait, Bill, what do you think the lie is?
The video game.
You think that? Oh my gosh! I was gonna say cable access TV. So that's kind of a three-way split.
Well, so what? We don't have to agree.
Let's try Bill's first. Video game because Bill has perhaps the most knowledge on this subject.
I've read a lot of these grants.
Thunderbird Strike video game. I have to remember what the... That's
No.
wrong. Minnesota taxpayers do fund this project.
Oh my
The
gosh.
Strike video
This
game.
Thunderbird Strike video game is real.
All right.
All
My
right, go for
condolences,
werewolf.
taxpayers.
Wow.
Let's go check out the werewolf.
What do I get if I'm right?
I really hope this is real. That is the wrong one.
I'm right!
Thank
Okay.
God.
Wow. That is
Thank
some really good writing by Isaac.
God. Isaac, producer
werewolf.
Isaac, well done.
Wow.
Yeah.
Props to that.
All right, so that's
that
actually
means
fair. I
cable
feel
access
good.
TV is real.
I feel good. I feel
is, like, the
better
most
now that
boring-
That's true.
that we're not funding. I'm not really
We're
thrilled
not
we're funding
funding the
video
werewolf.
game, but
Storytelling circle.
we're going to
Thanks,
do
producer Isaac.
a history of cable access because cable
Oof.
access nobody watches it anymore, so they have to make up videos about their history
Yeah.
that maybe
Right.
people will watch that.
Make
And
a documentary,
it's-
put it on cable access TV.
It's
yeah.
getting defunded, right? Supposedly.
Yeah, well, the cable access is not affected by it.
Okay.
They're not PBS or
Yeah.
NPR.
Well, that was a roller coaster, an absolute roller coaster of a time. I think that's all we got time for today.
Yeah. Everyone enjoy your werewolf storytelling circles this week.
Yeah, make that happen. I don't know. Maybe we should fund that. Maybe that should be our next golden turkey. Someone should develop a werewolf storytelling project.
We
Just
should
for the
submit
state.
our podcast.
For
American
Golden-
Experiment.
for a grant.
For a
For
grant.
a grant.
How do you do that?
Fund this, please.
We'll think
idea.
about that. In the meantime, like and subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. Also, write us a comment or something and let us know what do you think about whatever, gerrymandering, werewolf
or
storytelling,
the new game.
or the new game.
Thunderbird game. Let's kick things over to Kathryn and I and Sarah Montalbano. We'll see you next week.
American Experiment is supported by thousands of individuals like you. To join the movement, go to www.americanexperiment.org and click the yellow donate button. From all of us here, thank you.
Welcome back. Sarah Montalbano is our Energy and Environment Policy Fellow and expert here at American Experiment. Sarah, thank you for coming back on the program.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
We're going to be talking a little bit more in this conversation about mining minerals, the critical minerals needed to produce wind, solar, battery. And I'm really excited because there's been actually, I feel like kind of a lot of breaking news around those topics in the last week or so.
Yeah, and it's interesting topic because it's like this cognitive dissonance, between the people who say it's the same people who are pro solar and pro wind are anti mining, and so it's like, well, how do you expect that we accomplish all these things? So it's a very interesting topic, I think.
Yeah, so like just this week, cleanup was ordered after a battery fire at a San Diego energy storage facility. And I loved this quote from the Environmental Protection Agency's Southwest Regional Administrator, because it ties in so closely with our last conversation on the podcast about your Shattered Green Dreams report on the environmental costs of wind and solar. He said, quote, calling a technology green energy does not mean there are no environmental impacts. This was such an interesting case. It was a battery storage facility. It caught fire, and it prompted all sorts of environmental concerns due to the explosions and especially the chemical releases from these batteries. And we've talked a lot about how these lithium ion batteries are problematic because of, where the minerals have to come from. Mm-hmm. And I think I at least often overlook kind of the danger that's associated with these explosions. Talk a bit about that, Sarah.
Yeah, this is a really interesting case from California. Earlier this year, I believe it was, this Moss Landing battery storage facility experienced what is technically called thermal runaway. I might call it a fire. And it is...
In layman's terms.
Yeah, in layman's terms. But this is a fire that burns incredibly hot because it is chemically happening, and it is not something that firefighters can easily deal with. So that burned hot for several days. About 1,200 residents in the area evacuated while that was being controlled. And, some of them have been reporting in the aftermath, and there is lots of credible reporting on this, that they've been feeling ill. They've had respiratory effects and things like that. So, yeah, I loved this news article about the cleanup because these things should have cleanup when they go wrong. And it's not that every battery storage facility has those kind of errors, but we see this with EV batteries all the time, right? Especially if it's in a, small scooter that has a smaller battery. You're not really supposed to keep those in your apartments or anything like that because there are risks from poorly manufactured batteries from overseas manufacturing like China. So all of those things pose risks. And you don't think about it for battery storage, but it is absolutely a concern.
Yeah, it was crazy. You're right. So it happened back in May, to clarify. And now they're ordering the cleanup. It burned for 2 weeks. It burned from May 15th until May 28th. And that should tell you, I mean, how serious this is. And that totally ties in with what you were saying, Kathryn, about the dissonance between, people's perception of wind and solar as being these, broad strokes, green energy, completely clean sources, no drawbacks. And the reality, which is that every energy source does have drawbacks to consider and their own dangers to consider. This feels a bit like the battery version of a nuclear meltdown in some ways.
Yeah,
It's an excellent point you make here, because in the immediate aftermath of this, one local official said, this is a rough paraphrase of the quote, "This is the 3 Mile Island event for this industry."
Right.
And I don't think that's an understatement. I think that really has prompted a lot of concerns about how can we be more safe about this. I'm optimistic, like, just with nuclear, 3 Mile Island prompted a lot of rethinking about safety. And now we have one of the safest, nuclear industries in the world. So I hope batteries can do that. But, there's I think, a lot of concern that should be felt about this, especially if you're living in an area that has these storage facilities. So I really, it's so exciting and just awful to see.
Yeah.
Just because it's like, well, these are trade-offs that we've talked about, I think, for a long time within the conservative circles. These are trade-offs, and we should be able to acknowledge those trade-offs before disasters happen.
Right. It was so striking to see, the head of a regional head of the EPA of all organizations saying, wind and solar batteries,
Finally.
Finally, after years and years coming out and acknowledging that you can't call it green and ignore all of the drawbacks.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you like a not super on topic question, tangential question?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you know if this has anything to do with why you have to have these batteries in your carry-on on a plane, like the small, you know what I mean? Like whenever you go on a plane, they're like, if you have the lithium ion battery but they list things.
If
that
you're
have to
some
be in your
weirdo who has
carry-on.
that,
Like if
in your
there's
luggage.
it's in some like certain things. I mean, small version.
No, seriously. So I carry a power bank, and it's basically the same technology, lithium ion battery.
Oh my gosh.
It's like portable charger. Yeah, portable
Yes.
charger.
Which are exploding now, also. There was a brand that I own that was just recalled because they were exploding. So as you're saying this, I'm the weirdo who has the lithium-ion battery in my luggage.
Yeah, don't ever put that accidentally in your check. I don't think there's a
'Cause
serious...
Is it gonna start on fire, maybe? That's what they're worried about?
There's a lot of pressure changes in the cabin of an airplane, and, where the passengers are, they keep the pressure safe for humans. But in the actual luggage storage, they don't necessarily keep it at pressure. So.
I was like, oh my gosh. I've always wondered why they're like, these batteries, what's on your carry-on? Like, I've never really cared or paid attention.
Yeah, no.
All right.
I'm glad I kind of knew that.
We're asking and answering the hard-hitting questions on the podcast today.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Another kind of breaking news this week. The U.S. Department of Energy released a report warning that blackouts could increase by 100 times in 2030, a short 5 years away, if the U.S. continues to shutter reliable power sources and fails to add additional firm capacity. I am actually going to read this quote, too, from our Energy Secretary, Chris Wright. This report affirms what we already know. The United States cannot afford to continue down the unstable and dangerous path of energy subtraction previous leaders at Biden administration pursued. Subtweet. Forcing the closure of baseload power sources like coal and natural gas. This is exactly what we've been saying for years at American Experiment and what we see in Minnesota and what so much of your reporting has talked about, Sarah.
Yeah, it's super exciting to see. I haven't had a chance to look through this report yet and look at their assumptions and their conclusions, but I think directionally this is the right way that we should be talking about these things, right? Because we have been seeing warnings from the North American Electric Reliability Corporation for years that our grid here in the Midwest, MISO, is going to be facing a risk of blackouts in normal peak conditions over the next 10 years. That's just things like, everyone's going home and at 6 p.m. they turn on their lights, they turn on their dishwasher, they're cooking dinner.
Right.
Those are normal peak conditions. That's not just unusual weather. And that is largely identified as being caused by our retirements of coal and natural gas generation. I truly do think it's exciting to see an energy secretary that's actually talking about these things.
It's a nice change of pace.
Yes, it's a beautiful thing because I think he, in so many of his remarks, he hits the nail on the head by saying, look, this is about human flourishing and prosperity. We need electricity to do all of the things that make American life so great, and other countries want this too, and we should be supporting their use of coal and natural gas to be prosperous. So I just think it's the right attitude to take. I will need to be digging into that study some more, but I think directionally that's definitely the right way to go.
You touch on an interesting point. I think there's this weird perception on the left that people who advocate for coal and natural gas and nuclear either don't care about the environment. Well, maybe it's a both and. Maybe it's not either or. Don't care about the environment and are being bought off by oil and coal and natural gas. Like they just want to see big business succeed. They're John D. Rockefeller fans or something.
Yeah. Big oil is one of the original bigs,
right.
Like that's like
You're
the
right.
OG big.
And yet you're right. I mean, there is a very real component of this that is it's quality of life. For modern civilization, especially in America, it's the highest standard of living the world has ever seen. And a big part of that is reliable, affordable energy sources to make sure the lights don't go off.
Well, and that's how America benefited from those, of course, when we were developing. And now there's a lot of people worldwide who want to say current developing nations, you only should have wind and solar. And they want to, the world organizations want to put those standards on them, which is completely unfair when, the rest of us just came early enough that we profited from those sources that are better.
Yeah. And I think it's a complete misperception that coal and natural gas aren't actually good for the environment in a lot of ways, because at least with natural gas, even over the last 10 years, we've seen the hydraulic fracturing revolution here. And because natural gas has half of the emissions of coal, we've been switching our grid to operate more on natural gas, and we have so reduced our emissions over time. And that's the kind of innovation that I think we need to see. I think, in a free market perspective here, we would be seeing a lot of technology like carbon capture start to actually come to the fore and figure out how we can get the reliability and affordability attributes of these technologies while also mitigating their emissions. But I think the left has had such a kind of myopic view of wind and solar being the sole solutions to this. And we haven't even talked about nuclear, because I'm a huge fan of nuclear, and I think a lot of people should be, quite frankly. But wind and solar, proponents really treat nuclear as a distraction from, the true solutions to climate change and all of those things. So I really do think that the environmental impacts natural gas has largely been a good thing for the United States.
Right. I don't think there's anyone on the right advocating for these, reliable, affordable energy sources who's thinking, yes, let's pump more emissions in the air. I am pro-emission, carbon emission. Like, no one's out there doing that.
There's very few.
Have there really? What lunatic is out there advocating to pump as much carbon in the air as possible? Who is that helping? Maybe some people are pro global warming. Maybe that's what it is. They're like, I hate the cold Minnesota winters. Let's put more carbon in the air. Is this you? Are you one of the lunatics?
Maybe.
A lot of hot takes on the podcast today. Wow.
I know. Wow. I wouldn't mind it if it was a little
No
more.
comment.
Oh my gosh. I retract my statement. There are some weirdos out there who are
not me.
pro emissions. But
I would love to talk a little bit more about mining in America, because a lot of people, they advocate, like I said, for wind and solar, but then they don't want to. They don't want to do what's necessary, at least in America, to make those energy sources work. And instead, what happens is they just get done in other countries, right? So why is it so important, Sarah, that we advocate for bringing mining back to America?
Yeah, this is an ethical concern. And I think we've seen this first in kind of the consumer electronics context, where the cobalt needed in our phones is being mined in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And let me pull up my facts here so I get things straight. But all of these things are largely it being mined by children and workers that aren't in good conditions.
Mhm.
Here's what I was looking for. In 2024, the Department of Labor put out a report and had interviewed a ton of cobalt workers in the DRC, and 44% of them could not refuse to do hazardous work.
Gosh.
52%, that's a majority, reported children working at their mine site. And that is the kind of stuff that we are encouraging when we are refusing to do domestic mining projects safely and responsibly here at home. And I think Minnesota is just the crown jewel of safe and responsible mining. Why are we not doing more here? And I think up until very recently, it was largely due to a unsupportive federal government for those kind of things.
Well, and that's the problem with the anti-mining movement, or at least the anti-domestic mining movement in America, and especially Minnesota, is people don't want to actually stop using the products that require these critical minerals, like our cell phones. They just want to not. It's the not in my backyard, the NIMBY mentality. I just don't want to see those mines in my my beautiful home state.
But also the environmental impact, if you would talk about that a little bit, Sarah, what's the difference between doing it on the other side of the world and here in America? Don't we have better standards for those kind of things?
Oh, absolutely we do. It's really incredible the kind of disasters that you see from mines overseas, largely owned by China, because China has made such a strong push in recent years to gain ownership and, controlling shares of companies in all of these foreign countries doing these things. And in my report, Shattered Green Dreams, I go through just a couple case studies that were easily found within the last 2 years. I didn't have to go farther back, really, to get a couple of really kind of awful examples here. But in Zambia, in February of this year, a tailings dam from a Chinese-owned copper mine just washed out, and it flooded and contaminated the river in Zambia that's supplying drinking water to 5 million people.
Oh my gosh.
In all of this, another one that I found kind of appalling was an Indonesian tailings facility in March. Flooded the industrial park. Endangered the lives of 341 families in the nearby village. A subsequent breach just a couple days later killed one worker and 2 were missing at the time of that report. And I think it's really telling about this one because this mine originally in its plans wanted to just dump the tailings straight into the river, straight into the ocean.
Oh my gosh.
And that's the kind of stewardship we're seeing in mines overseas. We are never, ever going to see any mine in Minnesota, Alaska, Nevada, any mining state here in the United States just simply isn't going to entertain something like that.
Right.
We have incredible engineers who care a lot about doing responsible stewardship in their own backyard. And that's I think, the crux of my understanding of this issue is that the workers in these mines are also part of the community. And they know that they need to protect their local environment. And they are proud of doing it right. They're proud of living up to high standards. So I really do think that we need to have more domestic mining here because these are environmental impacts too. We just don't have to see them. But frankly, not in my backyard here means, squatting in someone else's.
Right. So there's the humanitarian ethical concerns with, sending our mining projects overseas. There's the environmental concerns because of how those projects are run. There's also national security concerns too, right? Because we are relying on foreign adversaries like China for so much of these minerals. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Mm-hmm. No, we are seeing, I think, a huge surge in the national security concerns right now. largely, I think, prompted by all of this tariff business. We're seeing that China has cut off the supplies of rare earths to the United States in many circumstances. Those are just starting to loosen up, but not by enough. We're seeing, rare earths, for example, the U.S. is importing 74% of the rare earth materials that we use, and about 90% of that is being processed by China. So,
Gosh.
74% is imported from China. We have not very much rare earth mining here in the U.S., if any. So, we're getting almost all of these things from overseas. And of course, the situation is equally dire for a lot of the minerals on the U.S. critical minerals list. I think 12 out of 50 are 100% import reliant. We get all of it from somewhere overseas.
Does it have to be that way? Or because you said some of them we don't have here in America, is that right? And we might have to be relying on them, but there's others that we're just choosing not to mine. Is that right?
Yeah, there's plenty we're choosing not to mine. I think copper, nickel, cobalt, all of those we have in abundance here in Minnesota.
Right.
We obviously can't mine for materials that aren't here. We will always have to procure some of these things from overseas. But what's a huge problem is that we don't really actually know all of the mineral deposits in the U.S. In part because we have not sufficiently explored U.S. federal lands, and we haven't done any actual mapping activities. We've already picked kind of the low-hanging fruit for the mineral deposits that are already at the surface, that are easy to mine, that are clearly really profitable. But we need to be doing more mapping as a country, and that's, I think, one of the things that we should talk about today. Is there's a bill that Pete Stauber just introduced that actually includes a mapping directive to help with some of that exploration problem.
So is that part of HR 4090?
Yes.
So we are launching a campaign very soon here to throw our support behind this national bill. This would not be a Minnesota-specific bill. Tell us about it. What is the tagline of the campaign? This is one of my favorites we've done in a while.
So I believe our campaign, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is going to be Make mining American again.
Woo!
Yes.
Yes.
I almost goofed that up, but
Kind of tripped you up in the tongue a little bit.
I was going to say make America mine again.
We considered
Mama.
that.
But I don't know. I don't know.
We felt like mine
I'm not
could be
the comms
taken two
professional.
ways. Make America mine again, mine personally. That did come up in conversation.
Okay, good.
A little peek behind the curtain here,
You
but
figured it out. Yeah.
Instead, you went with MMAA.
yeah, which
MMA?
Yeah.
No, I like it. I love it.
I love it. No, it's great. I'm very excited for this campaign because HR 4090, I think, is a really exciting bill. A lot of, I think, what we've seen so far in the first 6 months are executive orders, right?
Right.
And
which can be undone, unfortunately, if another administration comes in.
easily done. Just stroke of a pen, 3 years, it'll be gone. So what HR 4090, again, Pete Stauber introduced this one. It codifies a lot of pieces of these executive orders. It basically, it creates this mapping directive that, we're going to be doing more mapping on federal lands to figure out where deposits are. We're going to be having various heads of various agencies and departments give reports to the House to suggest things that they ought to be doing. And what's really exciting about the Section 5 in the bill actually is kind of an open-ended question to Interior to ask, look, what are the burdensome federal barriers to more mining in the U.S.? And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities here to suggest good things that could really make a difference for miners in the U.S.
So they're sort of soliciting feedback from the people trying to get mining projects moving, saying, what has your experience been with the federal government? What have the roadblocks been? Am I understanding that right?
Yes, yeah. It very explicitly, asks for input from the mining community too, which
That's
I think
great.
is really good to see. I think there's a lot of people that just wouldn't consider that important in this kind of question, but their actual experiences with these things are incredibly important. So, I personally think that permitting reform is going to come up very quickly in that kind of review. I think that the generalized permitting process that applies to any kind of project, wind, solar, transmission lines, mines, that is going to be a serious concern for them as well. Mines face a couple of interesting problems that other projects kind of don't. Is when they're doing exploration, they have a certain area of the surface that they can disturb. And right now it is a very small and restrictive amount. I think on Bureau of Land Management land, it's only about 5 acres. And so I think there's room to expand that and to give them a little more flexibility to actually do the exploration. Because if they can't get, cores from these areas, they can't figure out if there's actually a reasonable, viable mineral deposit there. And, the chances of going from exploration to a successful, economically viable mine is really only 1 in 1,000.
Oh my gosh.
And that's made even worse by the fact that you can't actually go out there and explore and start, accumulating those 999 duds that aren't going to actually become a viable mine.
Right. So it's already a difficult process that has largely been made even worse by adversarial administrations at the federal level.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and when it's in our best interest in every way we've just talked about for us to mine here in America. So it's always been sad to me to see the, government and miners at odds. Like those people should be working together, of course, to help American people. I also think that this is just like a really good time for this to happen, just to bring mining back to America, because this is the generation that grew up with like Minecraft. Are you familiar?
I have played a lot of Minecraft.
Okay, I have played a little, actually. It's the only video game I played a little of, and it's pretty fun. So I just feel like maybe there's like a new career interest from the youth.
Gonna whip out the pickaxes. Get those kids in mines.
Just a thought.
Oh my gosh.
Can you tell we're recording on a Friday? This is like the extent of my brain activity now after the end of this week. It's like,
a little job skill training on Minecraft. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. You make a silly point, but it leads to a serious one.
We're going to bring it home right now.
We're going to bring it home. There's kind of a talent crisis in mining right now because it's just not cool to young people to, do this, really dirty for the environment kind of career. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done at kind of the middle and high school levels, honestly, to point out that, in the U.S. we're doing things very safely and responsibly, and we need a variety of workers with all sorts of levels of education. Mining engineers, we need bachelor's degrees. We need a lot of technicians. You don't have to do some of these things. The industry is kind of facing a retirement cliff in the next 10 years. They're going to see about half of the workforce start to retire. And, that means that it's a very lucrative career for young people that yearn for the mines, so to speak. I've played a lot of Minecraft. I think mining's very cool. And that's just not true for a lot of young people. I think that, there's a PR question too, but I think everyone who gets into it, any young person that takes a mining class in college says, wow, this isn't what I thought it was. This is very cool. This is a very well-paying job in a field that I think I can make a difference in. So that's kind of the education component too. I think, American Experiment has been very supportive of technical education, I believe. And, that's just one of those that you can really make a good living on.
Yeah. And I do hope, up in our Iron Range, like the people who live up there, especially older people, I think still have this real respect for the mining history that they have up there. And I hope that that's being carried down to next generations. But I don't know, we'll see. Because it is such a historic part of our state and very cool part of our state. And I know a lot of people still believe in that up north, but I don't know if the young people do as much either. So let us know in the comments. If you live on the Iron Range, I'm curious. I'd like to hear from you.
What are your thoughts on mining?
Yeah.
Please.
So there is a hearing scheduled, tentatively scheduled, sometime in September for
Yes.
HR 4090.
Yes.
Congressional hearings. We'll keep you guys posted on that. This campaign's gonna be ramping up. Excuse me. Next,
I sure hope it's not wrapping.
It was a real short
Yeah.
one. So you guys will be hearing quite a bit of that. If you do want to take action, if you want to learn more about the Make Mining American Again campaign and contact your congressman, your congresswoman, go to americanexperiment.org/take-action and you'll be able to find everything there. Sarah, any final thoughts you want to leave with our viewers on this bill, what it means for Minnesota?
Oh, I think it would be very exciting. And I think there's just a lot of good things about codifying these more temporary kind of things, right? We can, be excited about a strong executive presence here, but it's really up to Congress to make sure that these changes come down and really get to benefit Minnesota and, all the states that are affected by mining. So I'm really excited about it. And I'm looking forward to hearing how it's received in September sometime.
Yeah, we look forward to bringing you back on for a little
Yes.
Zoom session, little update.
Yes, it'll be very
Sarah.
exciting.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, answer Kathryn's question in the comments. Pro mining?
Did you play
Irish?
Minecraft as a
Did you
child?
play Minecraft? Are you going to pick up the pickaxe when we get domestic mining here in Minnesota? We'll see you next week.